Marcus Thompson had always been the responsible one. At 28, he was the eldest of three siblings, the one who called his parents every Sunday, who never missed a birthday or holiday, who had spent countless weekends helping his father renovate their childhood home in suburban Denver. His sister Riley, 25, was the free spirit who bounced between jobs and relationships, charming her way through life with a smile that could melt glaciers. Their youngest brother, Tyler, 22, was still finding himself in college, majoring in something different each semester. The Thompson family had traditions carved in stone. Christmas morning meant everyone gathered in the living room of their parents' modest two-story home, drinking coffee from mismatched mugs while unwrapping presents beneath the towering Douglas fir that Dad insisted on cutting down himself each year. Mom would have prepared her famous cinnamon rolls, filling the house with warmth and sweetness that rivaled any Norman Rockwell painting. This particular Christmas morning started like all the others. Marcus arrived early, as usual, carrying bags of carefully wrapped gifts he'd spent weeks selecting. He found his parents, David and Linda Thompson, already in the kitchen, his father reading the newspaper while his mother bustled around preparing breakfast. They exchanged the usual pleasantries about the weather, work, and whether Tyler would actually show up on time for once. Riley arrived in a whirlwind of energy and designer clothing that Marcus knew she couldn't afford on her current barista salary. She hugged everyone enthusiastically, her long auburn hair catching the morning light streaming through the kitchen window. Tyler stumbled in 20 minutes later, looking like he'd rolled out of bed and thrown on yesterday's clothes, which he probably had. The gift exchange proceeded with its familiar rhythm. Marcus watched as his parents opened his carefully chosen presents, a cashmere scarf for his mother, a vintage tool set for his father, and smiled at their genuine appreciation. He received practical gifts in return: a new winter coat, some books, a gift certificate to his favorite restaurant. Riley squealed over jewelry and clothes, while Tyler seemed pleased with cash and gadgets. But then something shifted. Marcus noticed his parents exchanging meaningful glances, the kind of wordless communication that came from 30-plus years of marriage. His father cleared his throat and reached into his pocket, pulling out something small and metallic that caught the morning light. "Riley, sweetheart," Linda said, her voice carrying an unusual weight, "we have one more gift for you." David held up a shiny brass key attached to a keychain shaped like a small house. "This is for you, honey." Marcus felt his stomach drop as understanding began to dawn. The key was too new, too purposeful to be decorative. His parents' expressions were too serious, too loaded with meaning for this to be some simple trinket. Riley reached out with trembling fingers, accepting the key with a confused laugh. "What's this for?" "It's yours now," his father said simply. "The house key. This house is yours." The words hung in the air like smoke, heavy and suffocating. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face as the implications crashed over him like a tsunami. Marcus stared at the key in his sister's palm, certain he'd misheard. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked loudly in the sudden silence, each second stretching like an eternity. Tyler looked equally bewildered, his coffee mug suspended halfway to his lips, while Riley's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and something that might have been guilt. "I don't understand," Marcus managed, his voice sounding foreign in his own ears. "What do you mean it's hers?" Linda Thompson wrung her hands, a nervous habit Marcus recognized from his childhood whenever she had to deliver bad news. "We've been talking about this for months, Marcus. We're getting older, and we need to make sure the house stays in the family." "But why Riley?" The question escaped before Marcus could stop it, sounding more hurt than he'd intended. "I mean, I thought." David set down his newspaper with deliberate care, the way he did when he was preparing to explain something he'd already decided wasn't up for discussion. "Riley needs stability right now. She's been struggling to find her footing, and we thought this would give her the security she needs to build her future." Marcus felt like he was drowning in plain sight. This was the house where he'd taken his first steps, where he'd learned to ride a bike in the driveway, where he'd brought girlfriends to meet his parents. He'd always assumed that as the eldest, as the one who'd maintained the closest relationship with his parents, who'd helped with every repair and renovation, that he would inherit the family home. It wasn't about money. It was about legacy, about belonging, about being valued. "What about me?" Tyler interjected, echoing Marcus's thoughts. "Or Marcus. He's the one who's been here every weekend, helping with everything." Riley finally found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "I didn't ask for this. I don't even know if I want it." "Of course you want it," Linda said quickly. "It's a beautiful home, and the neighborhood is so safe. You could finally stop renting those terrible apartments and have something that belongs to you." Marcus noticed how his mother's reasoning centered entirely on Riley's needs, as if he and Tyler were afterthoughts in their own family narrative. The responsible son who'd never caused them a moment's worry, who'd graduated college debt-free and built a stable career in accounting, apparently didn't warrant the same consideration as the daughter who dropped out of 3 different colleges and had never held a job for more than 6 months. "I still don't understand the timing," Marcus said, struggling to keep his voice level. "You're both healthy. You're only in your early 60s. Why are you giving the house away now?" His parents exchanged another one of those loaded glances, and Marcus realized there was more to this story. His father's jaw tightened, a telltale sign that he was about to reveal something he'd been hiding. "We're selling it to her," David said finally. "For $1. It's cleaner legally and it helps with taxes." "Selling it? Marcus's voice cracked. So this isn't even a gift, it's a transaction. The dollar makes it legal, his father explained patiently, as if Marcus were still a child who needed complex concepts broken down into digestible pieces. But yes, essentially, we're giving her the house. The room felt like it was spinning. Marcus gripped the arm of his chair, trying to anchor himself to something solid in a world that had suddenly shifted beneath his feet. The conversation continued around Marcus like he was watching a movie of someone else's life. His parents explained the paperwork they'd already had drawn up, the legal consultations they'd scheduled for after the holidays, the timeline for transferring ownership. Riley sat clutching the key, looking increasingly uncomfortable as the magnitude of their decision became clear. "We've thought this through carefully," Linda insisted when Tyler pressed them for more explanation. "Riley has been having such a hard time lately, and we want to help her get back on her feet." Marcus wanted to scream. Riley had been having a hard time for as long as he could remember. She dropped out of Colorado State after 2 years, claiming the professors didn't understand her artistic vision. She'd moved to California to pursue acting, burning through her savings in 6 months before crawling back home. She'd started 3 different businesses, a food truck, an online boutique, and something involving handmade soaps, all of which had failed within a year. Meanwhile, Marcus had put himself through college, worked 2 jobs to graduate without student loans, and had been steadily employed at the same accounting firm for 6 years. He'd never asked his parents for money, never moved back home after college, never caused them sleepless nights wondering if he was okay. But apparently, responsibility wasn't rewarded in the Thompson family. It was taken for granted. "What about the work Marcus has put into this place?" Tyler asked, gesturing around the living room. "He's been here every weekend for years, helping with maintenance and repairs." Marcus appreciated his younger brother's support, but he also noticed how Tyler carefully didn't mention his own contributions. Tyler had always been too busy with school, friends, or whatever crisis was currently consuming his attention to help with household projects. "Marcus has been wonderful," Linda acknowledged, reaching over to pat his hand. "And we appreciate everything he's done, but Riley needs this more than he does. Marcus has his own apartment, his own life. He's established." The patronizing tone in his mother's voice made Marcus's skin crawl. He was established because he'd worked to become established. He'd made responsible choices, saved money, built a career. Riley's instability wasn't some accident of fate. It was the result of consistently poor decisions and an unwillingness to commit to anything that required sustained effort. "I don't feel right about this," Riley said suddenly, setting the key down on the coffee table like it was radioactive. "Marcus should have the house. He's the oldest and he's actually taken care of it." For a moment, Marcus felt a surge of hope. Maybe his sister would do the right thing. Maybe she'd recognize how unfair this was and decline their parents' offer. But David Thompson's expression hardened. "This isn't a democracy, Riley. Your mother and I have made our decision. The house is yours if you want it, but the offer won't stay on the table forever." There it was, the ultimatum Marcus recognized from his childhood. Their father's way of ending discussions before they could become arguments. Accept what we've decided, or lose the opportunity entirely. Riley picked up the key again, her fingers closing around it slowly. I need time to think about this." "Of course, sweetheart," Linda said quickly. "Take all the time you need. But remember, this is a wonderful opportunity for you to build something stable." Marcus stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor he'd helped refinish 2 summers ago. "I need some air." The December air hit Marcus like a slap, sharp and clean after the suffocating atmosphere inside. He walked aimlessly through his childhood neighborhood, past houses decorated with lights and inflatable lawn ornaments, trying to process what had just happened. His phone buzzed repeatedly in his pocket, texts from Tyler checking if he was okay, but Marcus wasn't ready to talk to anyone yet. He found himself at the small park where he'd played as a child, sitting on the same metal swing that had probably been old when he was 6. The chains creaked as he rocked back and forth, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. Everything felt surreal, like he'd stepped into an alternate universe where up was down and fairness was a foreign concept. His phone rang, Tyler's name on the screen. Marcus almost ignored it, but his brother's persistence finally wore him down. "Dude, what the hell just happened in there?" Tyler's voice was tight with confusion and anger. "I mean, I know I haven't been around as much as you, but that was seriously messed up." "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "I honestly don't know." Riley looked like she was going to throw up. She kept saying she didn't want it, but Mom and Dad just kept pushing. Marcus appreciated Tyler's outrage on his behalf, but part of him wondered if his younger brother was just relieved that he wasn't the one being passed over. Tyler had never shown much interest in the family home or maintaining family traditions. He'd probably assumed Marcus would inherit everything and been perfectly fine with that arrangement. "Are you going back inside?" Tyler asked. "Eventually. I just need to think." "Want me to come find you? I could use some air too. The tension in there is insane." Marcus almost said yes, but he realized he needed to be alone with his thoughts. "Thanks, but I think I need to sort this out myself first." After hanging up, Marcus tried to make sense of his parents' reasoning. They'd said Riley needed stability, but how was handing her a house going to provide that? She'd still need to pay property taxes, utilities, maintenance costs. With her sporadic employment history, How was she going to afford the ongoing expenses of homeownership? Or were his parents planning to subsidize those costs too? The more he thought about it, the more questions arose. When had his parents decided this? Had they discussed it with Riley beforehand, or was she as surprised as he was? Had they considered offering him the opportunity to buy the house himself, maybe at a family discount? Had they talked to a financial advisor about the tax implications, or were they just winging it? Most importantly, why hadn't they talked to him about any of this? Marcus had always believed his relationship with his parents was built on open communication and mutual respect. He'd thought they valued his opinions, appreciated his stability, respected his judgment. But apparently, they'd made one of the biggest decisions in their family's history without even consulting him. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Marcus, it's Riley. Can we talk? Not at the house, somewhere private." Marcus stared at the message for a long moment. Part of him wanted to ignore it, to let Riley figure out her own guilt without dragging him into it. But another part of him was curious about what she had to say. Maybe she had insights into their parents' thinking that he lacked. Maybe she knew something about their family dynamics that he'd missed. He texted back, "Coffee shop on Maple Street, the one by the bookstore. I see you in 20 minutes." The coffee shop was nearly empty on Christmas Day, just a few people nursing lattes and reading books in the corner booths. Marcus arrived first and claimed a table near the window, where he could watch the street and gather his thoughts. When Riley walked in, she looked smaller somehow, like the weight of the morning's events had physically diminished her. She ordered a complicated drink with multiple modifications while Marcus waited with his black coffee, watching her fidget with her purse strap. When she finally sat down across from him, her usual confidence had evaporated, replaced by something that looked like genuine distress. "I didn't know," she said immediately before Marcus could speak. "I swear to you, I had no idea they were planning this." Marcus wanted to believe her, but Riley had always been a skilled manipulator when it suited her purposes. Still, the uncertainty in her voice seemed genuine. "How could you not know? This isn't something they just decided this morning. I've been staying with them for the past month," Riley admitted, avoiding his eyes. "Since I got evicted from my apartment in November. Maybe they got the idea because I was there all the time, helping around the house." This was news to Marcus. His parents hadn't mentioned that Riley was living with them again. In fact, when he'd asked about her during his last visit, they'd been vague about her current situation. "Why didn't anyone tell me you were evicted?" Riley's cheeks flushed. "Because I knew you'd lecture me about financial responsibility and making better choices. I didn't need to hear, 'I told you so,' when I was already feeling like a complete failure." Marcus felt a stab of guilt. Had he really become so judgmental that his own sister couldn't confide in him when she was struggling? When had their relationship shifted from supportive siblings to him playing the role of disapproving older brother? "I wouldn't have lectured you," he said, though even as the words left his mouth, he wasn't entirely sure they were true. "I would have helped." Would you? Or would you have helped while explaining all the ways I could have avoided the situation in the first place? The question hung between them like a challenge. Marcus realized that Riley might have a point. Somewhere along the way, his concern for her well-being had morphed into criticism of her choices. He'd started seeing her struggles as self-inflicted rather than circumstances she needed support to overcome. "I've been trying to get back on my feet," Riley continued. "I got a job at that new gallery downtown, and I've been saving every penny to find a new place. But Mom and Dad kept talking about how hard it must be, how uncertain everything was for me. I thought they were just being supportive." "So when did the house idea come up?" "Yesterday, actually. Dad pulled me aside after dinner and said they'd been thinking about my future, about how they could help me build something stable. He mentioned the house, but I thought he was talking about letting me stay in my old room longer, not this." Riley gestured helplessly, as if the magnitude of their parents' offer was still sinking in. Marcus found himself believing her story. It aligned with his parents' pattern of making grand gestures without fully thinking through the consequences. "Do you want it?" Marcus asked bluntly. "The house, I mean." "I don't know," Riley said miserably. "It's an incredible gift, but it doesn't feel right. You're the one who's been taking care of it, who knows every creaky floorboard and leaky faucet. You're the one who should inherit it." But, but I'm also terrified of turning it down and having nowhere to live. The job at the gallery pays okay, but not enough for a deposit and first month's rent on top of everything else I owe." Marcus studied his sister's face, seeing vulnerability there that she usually kept hidden behind bravado and charm. Riley had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in their parents' eyes, but maybe that perception had been as much of a burden as a blessing. Maybe the constant forgiveness and second chances had prevented her from learning how to navigate failure and disappointment like everyone else. "What if we talked to them together?" Marcus suggested. "Explained that this doesn't feel fair to either of us." Riley shook her head. "You saw Dad's face when I hesitated. He's made up his mind, and you know how he gets when he thinks he's doing something generous. Any pushback will just make him more determined to prove he's right." This was true. David Thompson had always been stubborn, but his obstinacy reached legendary proportions when he believed he was helping someone. Marcus remembered the time their father had surprised their mother with an expensive anniversary trip to Hawaii, despite her repeatedly mentioning that she'd prefer to use their savings for new kitchen appliances. Dad had been so invested in his romantic gesture that he'd ignored her actual wishes in favor of what he thought she should want. "So what do we do?" Marcus asked. "I don't know. Accept it and figure out how to make it work. Try to find a way to include you in the ownership somehow." Mom and Dad wouldn't go for shared ownership. They want this to be simple, and they want it to solve your housing problem permanently. They sat in silence for several minutes, watching the few other customers come and go. Marcus found himself thinking about all the weekends he'd spent at the house, the hours of labor he'd invested in maintaining and improving it. He'd never asked for payment or recognition. He'd done it because he loved the house and wanted to preserve it for the family. But apparently, sweat equity didn't count for much in his parents' calculation. "There's something else," Riley said suddenly. "Something I probably should have mentioned earlier." Marcus felt his stomach clench. "What now?" "The job at the gallery. It's not exactly stable. The owner mentioned that she might have to close after the first of the year if sales don't pick up. And there are some other things, financial things, that I haven't been completely honest about." "What kind of things?" Riley fidgeted with her coffee cup, avoiding his eyes again. "Credit card debt. More than I told Mom and Dad about. And I borrowed money from someone I probably shouldn't have borrowed money from." "How much are we talking about?" 25,000, maybe closer to 30 if you count the interest that's been accumulating. Marcus felt like the ground was shifting beneath him again. "Riley, Jesus, how did you let it get that bad?" "The same way anyone lets debt get out of control, a little bit at a time, thinking I'd figure out how to pay it back later. The acting classes in LA were expensive, and I had to eat while I was auditioning. Then the business ventures all required startup capital. Each time I thought I was investing in my future, but nothing worked out the way I planned. This changed everything. If Riley was carrying that much debt, she couldn't afford the ongoing costs of homeownership even if the house itself was free. Property taxes alone would be several $1,000s a year, not to mention utilities, maintenance, and repairs. "Do Mom and Dad know about the debt?" "Some of it. They know I've been struggling financially, but not the full extent." Marcus leaned back in his chair, trying to process this new information. His parents weren't wealthy. They were comfortable middle-class retirees living on fixed incomes. If they were giving Riley the house as a way to solve her financial problems, they had no idea how deep those problems actually ran. "You have to tell them," Marcus said finally. "About the debt, about the job situation, all of it. They're making this decision based on incomplete information." "I can't," Riley said immediately. "If they knew how bad things really were, they'd. I don't know what they'd do. Probably try to pay off my debts themselves, and they can't afford that." but they can afford to give you a house worth $300,000. That's different. The house is an asset they already own. It's not like they're taking money out of their retirement accounts. Marcus realized that Riley didn't fully understand the financial implications of what their parents were proposing. Riley, gifting you the house could have serious tax consequences for them. And if you can't afford to maintain it, you'll end up losing it anyway. Then everyone loses. What do you mean? Marcus pulled out his phone and did some quick research on gift tax laws. Okay, so if they sell it to you for $1, they're essentially making a gift of the difference between the sale price and the fair market value. That's a huge gift, and it'll eat into their lifetime gift tax exemption. Plus, you'll inherit their cost basis, which means you'll owe capital gains taxes if you ever sell it. Riley stared at him blankly. I don't understand half of what you just said. It means this generous gesture could end up costing both you and them a lot of money in taxes. Money that none of you really have to spare. So what are you saying? That I should turn it down? Marcus hesitated. Part of him wanted to tell her yes, absolutely turn it down. Let their parents reconsider and maybe offer the house to him instead. But looking at his sister's anxious face, he realized that her problems wouldn't magically disappear if she refused their parents' offer. She'd still be unemployed, still be carrying massive debt, still be essentially homeless. I'm saying we need to talk to them together, lay out all the facts, and help them understand what they're really proposing. And if they still want to go through with it, then we figure out how to make it work for everyone. Riley looked skeptical. How? Marcus was quiet for a moment, an idea forming in his mind. It wasn't perfect, and it would require some sacrifice on his part, but it might be the solution that served everyone's interests. What if you took the house, but I became a partner in maintaining it? I keep doing the repairs and upkeep, maybe contribute to some of the ongoing costs, and eventually we work out some kind of ownership arrangement that feels fair. You do that, even after they basically slapped you in the face today. I do it for the house, Marcus said honestly, and for the family. I don't want to see you lose everything, and I don't want to see Mom and Dad make a decision they'll regret. Riley reached across the table and squeezed his hand. You're a better person than I am. No, I'm just thinking longer term. If this blows up badly, it won't just hurt you, it'll tear the whole family apart. Tyler will get caught in the middle. Mom and Dad will feel guilty and defensive, and I'll spend the rest of my life being the bitter older brother who got screwed over. Is that how you feel, screwed over? Marcus considered the question carefully. Hurt, definitely. Confused about why they didn't talk to me first, but maybe not screwed over exactly. Maybe just overlooked. They finished their coffees in relative silence, both lost in thought. Finally, Riley spoke up. "Should we go back, face the music?" "Yeah," Marcus said, standing up and putting on his coat. "But we're going to have a real conversation about this. No more surprises, no more half-truths. Everything on the table." When they returned to the house, they found Tyler in the kitchen making sandwiches while their parents sat at the dining room table, speaking in low, urgent voices. The conversation stopped abruptly when Marcus and Riley walked in, and the sudden silence felt loaded with tension. "We need to talk," Marcus announced, pulling out a chair at the table. "All of us about everything." David Thompson's jaw tightened. "Marcus, we've already explained our decision. Your mother and I don't need to justify." "Dad, stop." Marcus held up a hand. "Just listen for 5 minutes, okay? Then you can tell me I'm out of line." Linda looked between her husband and son, clearly torn between keeping the peace and standing by their decision. "Maybe we should hear what they have to say, David." Riley sat down next to Marcus, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Tyler abandoned his sandwich making and joined them at the table, sensing that whatever was about to happen was important. "First," Marcus began, "I want you to know that I'm not angry about your decision to give Riley the house. Hurt, yes. Confused about why you didn't talk to me first, absolutely. But not angry." "Marcus," his mother started, but he continued. "However, I don't think you have all the information you need to make this decision wisely. Riley has some things she needs to tell you." All eyes turned to Riley, who looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. But to her credit, she took a deep breath and began talking. "I wasn't completely honest about my situation," she said quietly. "The eviction wasn't just bad luck. I've been struggling with debt for a couple of years now. Credit card debt mostly, from when I was trying to make it in LA and then from the business ventures that didn't work out." "How much debt?" David asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Around $30,000. Linda gasped, pressing her hand to her mouth. David's face went through several expressions before settling on grim resignation. "And the job at the gallery might not last past the new year," Riley continued. "The owner is thinking about closing." "Jesus, Riley," Tyler muttered. "Why didn't you tell us any of this before?" "Because I was embarrassed, and I thought I could figure it out on my own." Marcus watched his parents process this information. His father's expression had shifted from defensive to thoughtful, while his mother looked like she was calculating numbers in her head. "This changes things," David said finally. "It doesn't have to," Marcus interjected. "But we need to be realistic about what we're dealing with. Riley can't afford to maintain the house on her own, even if it's gifted to her. And there are tax implications that could be expensive for all of you." He explained what he'd researched about gift taxes and capital gains, watching his parents' eyes widen as they realized the complexity of what they'd proposed. "I had no idea," Linda admitted. "We just wanted to help Riley get back on her feet." "And that's admirable," Marcus said. "But maybe there's a better way to do it." "Such as?" Marcus glanced at Riley, who nodded encouragingly. "Such as keeping the house in the family while finding a way for Riley to live there affordably and get her finances stabilized." "What do you mean?" David asked. "What if Riley moves back into her old room, pays a reasonable rent that covers her share of the utilities and taxes, and uses the money she saves to pay down her debt? Meanwhile, I continue helping with maintenance and repairs like I always have. When Riley's back on her feet financially, we can revisit the ownership question." The suggestion hung in the air while Marcus's parents exchanged another one of their wordless conversations. Riley looked relieved at the prospect of a solution that didn't require her to take on the overwhelming responsibility of homeownership while drowning in debt. "That's not solving Riley's long-term housing situation," Linda said finally. "She needs stability, not just a temporary place to crash." "Mom, I think stability is something I need to build, not something you can give me," Riley said quietly. "Marcus is right. Taking on the house right now would just be setting me up to fail in a bigger way." Tyler, who'd been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. "What happens to the house long term? I mean, if we're talking about fairness, shouldn't all three of us have some say in what happens to it eventually?" It was a fair question, and one that Marcus realized they'd all been dancing around. Their parents were in their early 60s and in good health, but estate planning was still a conversation worth having. "That's exactly why we need to think this through carefully," Marcus said. "Instead of making emotional decisions based on who needs help right now, we should be thinking about what's best for the family as a whole." David Thompson leaned back in his chair, looking older than he had that morning. "You're right. We got so focused on wanting to help Riley that we didn't consider all the angles." "I appreciate that you want to help me," Riley added. "But I think I need to prove to myself, and to you, that I can handle my responsibilities before I take on something as big as owning a house." Marcus felt a surge of pride in his sister. It couldn't be easy for her to turn down such a generous offer, especially when she was in such a precarious financial position. "So what are you proposing exactly?" Linda asked Marcus. "Riley moves back home temporarily and pays reasonable rent, maybe $500 a month, which is way less than she'd pay for an apartment, but enough to cover her share of expenses. She uses the money she saves to aggressively pay down her debt. I continue helping with house maintenance, Maybe we set up a more formal arrangement where I contribute to major repairs or improvements. And then what? Then we see where everyone stands in a year or two. Maybe Riley's finances are stable and she wants to buy the house from you at fair market value. Maybe Tyler's out of college and wants to be part of the equation. Maybe you decide you want to downsize and sell to someone outside the family. The point is, we make decisions based on facts and planning, not crisis management. Riley nodded enthusiastically. I like this plan. It gives me a chance to prove I can be responsible while not setting me up to fail. What about inheritance? Tyler asked. I mean, I know I haven't been as involved in taking care of the house, but it's still my childhood home too. Marcus looked at his younger brother with new respect. Tyler might be scattered and unfocused, but he was raising legitimate questions about fairness and family equity. Those are conversations we can have as a family over time, Marcus said. Maybe we set up some kind of trust or shared ownership structure eventually. Maybe we decide that whoever ends up with the house also takes responsibility for making sure the others are treated fairly. The point is, we don't have to solve everything today. David stood up and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at the backyard where he'd taught all three of his children to throw a baseball. When he turned back to face them, his expression was thoughtful. I think Marcus is right. We were trying to fix everything at once instead of taking it step by step. But what about the legal paperwork we already had drawn up? Linda asked. We can cancel it, David said simply, or put it on hold until we've had time to think this through properly. The rest of Christmas Day passed with a strange sense of relief, as if a storm had passed without causing the devastating damage everyone had feared. Riley helped their mother finish preparing dinner, while Marcus and Tyler worked on assembling a bookshelf their father had received as a gift. The conversation flowed more naturally than it had in months, without the undercurrent of tension that had marked recent family gatherings. Over dinner, they discussed the practical details of Riley's return home. Her old bedroom would need some updating. It still contained remnants of her teenage years, posters of bands she'd outgrown and furniture that was too small for an adult. They talked about house rules, expectations, and timelines for reassessing the arrangement. I want to be clear about something, Riley said as they were clearing the dishes. I'm not moving back home to hide from my problems. I'm doing this so I can face them head on without worrying about where I'm going to sleep. We know, sweetheart, Linda said, squeezing her daughter's shoulder. And we're proud of you for being honest about everything. Marcus found himself feeling optimistic for the first time all day. Maybe this crisis had actually been a blessing in disguise, forcing their family to have conversations they'd been avoiding for years. Maybe it would bring them closer together instead of driving them apart. But as the evening wore on, Marcus began to notice things that suggested not everyone was entirely happy with the new arrangement. His father seemed withdrawn, responding to questions with nods and grunts instead of his usual engaged commentary. His mother kept glancing at Riley with a worried expression, as if she was concerned that their daughter might change her mind about accepting help. When Tyler announced he was heading back to his apartment near campus, Marcus decided to walk him to his car. The brothers stood in the driveway for a few minutes, their breath visible in the cold air. "That was intense," Tyler said, unlocking his car door. "Yeah, but I think we handled it well. Everyone seems okay with the compromise." Tyler hesitated before getting into his car. "Do you really think this is going to work? Riley living at home again, trying to pay off that much debt on a gallery worker's salary." It was a fair question, and one that Marcus had been trying not to think about too carefully. "I think it's better than the alternative. At least this way, if she struggles, we can adjust the plan instead of watching her lose the house." "And you're really okay with not inheriting it? I mean, you've put more work into that place than the rest of us combined." Marcus considered his brother's question. Was he okay with it? The hurt from that morning still stung, but the rational part of his mind recognized that his parents' original plan had been deeply flawed. This new arrangement at least gave everyone time to figure out what was fair and sustainable. "I'm okay with not inheriting it right now," Marcus said finally. "Maybe I'll feel differently in a few years, but for now, I just want our family to stay together."